When I said Mihi's spyglass revealed the truth, I didn't mean facts, because people cannot be understood by their facts alone. I'll prove this later, but for now, here are mine. Once upon a time, I was on scholarship in music school, after somehow nailing the audition on my clarinet, a life choice my high school band director of a father had warned me against many times, because music isn't a career, not really, and no matter how much he actually loved his job, he didn't want me to end up like him, sublimating his artistic desires to teach a passel of horny asshole teenagers, though I, at least, would never feel the burden of white suburban parents bent on the Ivies pretending they didn't understand my accent. And maybe my mental health was the best, and maybe it wasn't, but what I can tell you is that I was good. Good enough that my sophomore year, I was selected for soloist on a performance of K622, Mozart's Clarinet Concerto in A major. I'd aced the audition, in no small part because the K622 was one of my father's favorite pieces. The bouncy, mellifluous runs of notes that glide carelessly through the full range of the instrument. The way it had been published posthumously without an autograph to explain how Mozart had wanted it to be performed. Musical historians can't even agree on the exact instrument it had been made for. The basset horn, the A clarinet, or the basset clarinet, none of which are common members of modern classical ensembles. By then, my parents had already started pulling away and weren't returning a lot of my calls. When they did, they always seemed distracted, as if there was something else they'd rather do. They'd assured me they would attend my performance, though, but when I sat there bathed in the bright lights, scanning the shadowy impressions of the audience for their silhouettes, I couldn't find them. It was like my muscles just solidified, my fingers, my tongue, my guts. I couldn't move, and everything was going wavy. I managed to pull it together and blow into the mouthpiece, but it wasn't notes, just squawks. There I was, on stage in front of a packed auditorium, honking like a goose. I ran off stage, threw up, skipped class, weeks, then months, and then nobody paid the measly tuition bill that was left over after my scholarships had been applied. When they evicted me from the dorms, I went to my parents' house, but my father wouldn't let me in. We stood there on the porch, a mist of sleet quietly falling around us, until he handed me his keys. "Go to a hotel or a friend's house," he said. "We can talk about this later." Maybe things would have turned out differently if I'd confessed to failing out of college, to losing my scholarship, if I'd screamed at him about the bill, if I hadn't lied about having money, lied about having friends. I took their car to the Plaisance Sunbeam Library. I knew from 1,000 childhood visits that it wasn't open on Sundays, that it has a small employee lot around the back that's obscured from the main road. I slept there that night, in the back seat of my parents' car, my breath fogging the inside of the windshield as the evening cooled, eventually turning to frost. When I woke shivering at dawn and looked out, I didn't see anything through the ice but soft shapes. And then I closed my eyes, and there it was, a door hanging in the corner of my mind, one I hadn't seen since I was a child and obsessed with a book about a girl and a spyglass. I saw myself stepping through, and for a moment, everything smelled like smoke. I turned the car on and let the engine warm. I scraped the ice, on the outside, on the inside, the legacy of my frozen breath, until there was a hole large enough to see. And then I pulled onto the highway and drove the 2.5 hours to the big city, to Grand Station, Illinois, thinking I'd make a new life for myself, one where I was a hero and successful and loved. And if I sometimes slipped into Mihi's world and saw things that weren't really there, if I sometimes leaned into my fantasies just for the smell of smoke and beach sand, if I found myself drawing a special sigil on my apartment doors with my finger to ward off the deaths of my family in strange and gruesome ways, the same way Mihi's counting warded off evils in the book, well, that was okay, because I had a dream, a story, a new life. But I was wrong, because the life I live now isn't new. It's just a copy of the one I left behind, and I don't know the way back.